You can't be serious, man. You cannot be serious!
Now, Don, the man, a gentleman, person, being non-binary and politically correct, this is a person that we're about to speak to. I've had an indirect relationship with him for a decade or more, primarily when the Essendon drugs saga was under full way, under full steam ahead, and I spoke, as I say, indirectly to him, and he contacted me earlier in the year and said he was coming back from overseas, and I said I'd like to chat to him about maybe some things that he might enlighten us to about Essendon, and also he had a bit of a run-in with the VCAT and the Australian Medical Board about something. Maybe he can shed some new light on what was an intriguing and the most controversial AFL saga in probably its history, about Essendon being dealt a pretty savage blow and belted from pillar to post by the media and everyone else. So this is Mr. Doctor, are you? Robin Wilcourt.
Yes, good
welcome
morning.
to You Cannot Be Serious, Robin. I really appreciate you coming in. And as I say, I indirectly had a relationship with you because I was intrigued as to what was going on at Essendon, and like everyone else, no one really knew what the bottom line was. And you are here because you had an indirect relationship with the man accused, the infamous Stephen Dank. He recruited you, did he not, or co-opted you, or drafted you into his campaign to oversee the implementation of the supplement scheme that Essendon was going to use. Is that correct, basically? Tell me if I get any of this wrong, because, as I say, we're just going off the top of our head here.
Sure, well, that's the story, but it's utterly screwed up, and it's not what happened. So let's get right into what did happen. So I'll talk a little bit about how I got to know Stephen Dank, because it's good to see the background. So when I first came to Melbourne, it was because Como Compounding Pharmacy wanted me to sort out a lot of the prescriptions that were being prescribed by some of the doctors here in Melbourne for women with menopausal symptoms, because my background is in obstetrics and gynecology, and I've been working in Adelaide, and he actually contacted me when I was in Adelaide and said, would I be interested in sorting out many of these women's health issues?
And was that prescribing peptides for anti-aging?
No, it wasn't. It was strictly for menopausal symptoms, using things like estrogen and progesterone creams. And there was a protocol.
Hormonal parameters.
Yes. Yep. So there was a protocol called the.
I got that.
Starts with a P, ends with an S. Yeah.
I got that off. I don't know where I got hormonal parameters, but someone told me.
It sounds good to me.
That's very smart.
Yeah, I'll take it. So anyway, he asked me if I could sort what was called the Wiley, W-I-L-E-Y, protocol, which was developed by an extraordinary American woman who had been mistreated with her postmenopausal symptoms, and she decided that she'd delve into it and figure out a better way of giving hormones to women that were not as dreadful as the typically prescribed rubbish that we do here and in America as well. And I became certified to use the so-called Wiley protocol. She was very strict about which doctors she would use, and when I turned up in Australia, I was the first person in Australia to actually be certified by her organisation to oversee this protocol. And so Como Compounding heard about it. They had patients on it. They thought they weren't being treated properly and wanted me to come and sort it out. So I came to Melbourne on a regular basis, usually for a weekend, from Adelaide, did my regular job in Adelaide at the Queen Elizabeth Hospital, came here to sort these people out. And in the process of that, I started getting, because I knew hormones really well, I started getting male patients thrown into this mix. And then Como Compounding said to me, I've got somebody that I think you really should meet. And it was Stephen Dank. And at that point, the reason for that was I heard about peptides. I didn't know anything about them at that moment, but I was really intrigued by what they could do. And the more I read, the more intrigued I got, and I became convinced that this would be the wave of the future for a lot of medical treatment, and I believe that even more strongly today than I did then.
And just before you go on, are peptides still, are they a legal substance that you're allowed to give anyone, any
Yes.
sporting body, any peptides are not illegal?
They're not illegal.
No,
they have
right.
been approved by the TGA,
Right.
or they wouldn't be sold in Australia, and they're sold here.
So Stephen
Perfect.
Dank thought he recruited you to come onto his team indirectly were you to give pathology blood tests to the Essendon footballers? No?
Not quite, but I'll get to that.
All right, good.
Yes, because what's believed out there and what was written is not what actually happened. And so I'm delighted to be sitting here now to actually straighten this out. Stephen was giving the players,
Do you know what he was giving them?
most of it was vitamin supplementation, things like colostrum, which is the precursor of milk. It's the first
Yep,
stuff
whatever.
that's produced, and it's believed to have some beneficial effects. All of those things are completely legal.
Growth hormone?
Sorry?
Growth hormone? Was that involved? No. No.
Colostrum contains growth hormone-like peptides,
Ah.
but they're not illegal.
Yep.
So I became interested in hearing about that, and so he was wanting to know were there other things that I could recommend to help improve their health. That'd be like adding vitamin E, vitamin D, vitamin C.
Yep.
Nothing untoward here at all. In the middle of it all, we started talking about peptides that at this point WADA had not banned, and neither had ASADA. They were just becoming aware of these so-called peptides. And we went through a list of things that would be helpful in fixing inflammation and healing.
Yes.
And those peptides were things like thymosin beta-4, AOD, and so on. Now, testosterone and growth hormone never came up in the discussions because Stephen Dank knew they could not be used, and he never for 1 minute suggested they could
Just
be.
before I lose track, you just said thymosin beta-4.
Yes.
That was illegal, wasn't it?
Well-
Thymosin alpha
One,
is okay.
yes.
But beta-4 was the questionable product.
Correct.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
at that point, neither ASADA nor WADA had stepped in to put
Say
them in.
beta-4 was illegal.
But they did, and they said they're illegal. So they stepped in and said they're illegal. Now,
Before Essendon were accused of, or Dank was accused of...
they by that time they were illegal. When I first started talking to
So
Stephen,
he was prescribing them when they were considered illegal?
Stephen swears he never did. So I have to take that at
Yep.
face value because that's what he said. And he told me very directly, and I have no reason at all to disbelieve him. No reason whatsoever, because it came up at around the time WADA and ASADA were evaluating peptides to see which ones could be used and couldn't be. And he never said, oh, we've been using them, and oh my God, now we can't use them. That never came up in conversation.
You would be the only person that does believe him.
I probably am, but I was with him.
Yeah, that's right. You're
through
intimately involved. Yep.
Yeah, but
So we
absolutely.
take you on face value if you say that.
Yeah, absolutely. I had, and there are a lot of things about Steve Dank. Our relationship got incredibly fractured.
Do you have a
and
good relationship with him? No.
Not now.
Not now?
I did at
Did he
this
throw
point.
you under the bus a bit, did he?
Well, he didn't come to my defence at anywhere in here, so that was interesting. But at that time, I got to tell you, Stephen Dank, for all the weirdness about him as a person, and I think I can say that without, in my opinion, I need to add my opinion so that I don't get sued for this. He's an incredibly intelligent person. His knowledge base is amazing. He's got a memory like a bloody elephant. And he remembers the finest details about all these medicines. You could ask him about anything, and he'll come back with a better response than you can ask your average doctor out there who wouldn't have a clue. So from that point of view, I really enjoyed the intellectual interaction with him.
For the sake of this conversation, we should say that at no stage were Essendon or Dank found guilty of supplying any illegal substances to the Essendon Football Club or the players. They were never found guilty of it, clinically or factually, were they?
Correct. That's 100% correct.
The only problem was that they said there was a more than reasonable suspicion that they had been getting illegal substances administered to them, and on that basis, I think you were sanctioned indirectly, and of course Dank was. Is that vaguely accurate?
You're getting vaguely accurate.
Yes, just tell me, just
it's sort of skirting,
tidy it up for me.
It's skirting around the edges of actually what happened. But yes, perception from the point of view of VCAT, for whom I have absolutely no regard because of what I'll come into in a minute, and APRA, the medical board.
Is that to do with Essendon or just...
Yes, all to do with Essendon.
Yes, I'll go ahead.
Yeah.
Yep, that's interesting.
That assumption became fact. So what was assumed became, that's what happened. Well, that's not scientific, and first of all, that's not justice in any shape or form. To assume something and then, because you've assumed it, you now say it's a fact. So in all of this process, at no time did I ever think for 1 minute that Stephen Dank administered anything illegally to him. Now, I do believe, but he didn't tell me this, but we talked about it in general because the players were making jokes about it, that they did get some injections, which I think was melanotan 2. And melanotan 2 turns you brown without having to go out in the sun, and it also gives you rip-roaring erections. And so
you wouldn't have an outer of it, would you, in your car?
Oh, I've got tons. Do you want some?
Right. Well, just leave a box of it at the doorstep when you leave, will you?
Well, in fact, a variant of melanotan 2 is available. It's called PT141, and it's specifically for sexual arousal. And it's approved for use in the United States for women with sexual arousal disorder.
So the obvious question, Robin, is what did Stephen Dank want to prescribe that to the Essendon Football Club to make them brown and get an erection? What is that about?
I guess it's got nothing to do with balls.
What is the association there?
I actually have.
Were you involved in that, or was it Dank doing it?
Yeah, no, I had no
because the coaching staff were involved in getting that injection as well, weren't
they?
Right.
What's the benefit of that beta 4 and the peptides that they were getting? What benefit did it give the players? Was it anti-inflammatory? Was it what was it?
Let's assume that they weren't getting.
Okay, so
because we don't know that, and I still to this day believe Steve Dank. I absolutely believe him. There are lots of reasons why I think that's because he was very open about all this stuff.
Yeah.
What do you? Wouldn't it be good if we could do? And you could go through the list of things. Thermosin beta 4 helps with healing. It's remarkable, and it really should be allowed. It's got nothing to do with enhancement of anything. It's stupid. I mean, during the discussion that I had with VCAT and APRA was, if you inject local anaesthetic into the ankle of a football player and bandage him up, you have enhanced his performance.
That's it. Don and I played most of our career under that
sort of thing.
That guidance.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know that well. That's enhancement by the definition that they tried to get all of us on. That if you try to make the player better...
to mitigate your injury.
Yeah, mitigate the injury. And it happens all the time. So the hypocrisy in there was amazing. I suppose at the end of the day, and I'm going to pose this now rather than at the end of this discussion, is why did this happen? Why was there this witch hunt against Essendon and Steve Dank, and then indirectly and then very directly myself? Why did this take place? And to this day, I don't know the answer to that, because none of it makes sense. It just doesn't. Had the players been given testosterone or growth hormone or something like, okay, I get that openly banned substances, but why on earth skirt around these peptides that really are harmless in the sense of performance enhancement? They simply don't.
It's the same argument I have with the Asada and Wider at the moment with THC. THC's banned and it's not an performance enhancing, and it's still a banned substance. So a similar thing with the healing from the beta 4.
So the AFL hitched their wagon, if you like, to WADA and decided they would abide by their drug investigations and schemes. And do you think WADA, the World Anti-Doping Authority, Do you think they thought we'll go bang with a big stick down here in the bottom of Australia and grab hold of a club while the Russians and the Chinese and the Olympic Federation and every other sport in the world was using far greater enhancement drug, steroids and things, and they thought they'll go whack down here and make a name for themselves? Robin.
I think that's absolutely the case. I think this was to set an example.
That's Dick Pound was head of it then, wasn't he?
Yes, miserable POS, I think.
POS?
Yeah, piece of shit, Don, please.
Okay,
Awesome.
you can say all right. But yes, Dick Pound was behind all this. His hatred of anybody who ever used anything that he called, a controlled substance or banned substance is beyond my comprehension. Probably one of the greatest 100-meter runners, and I'm not going to mention the name. You only have to look at that person and see testosterone is in there by the bucketful.
She got suspended for that. Didn't,
Yeah.
No, we're not Merlin.
Righto, we know.
What's her name? No,
Yeah,
that's
Marion
right.
Jones.
She was sprung. She conceded that she'd taken them. So Marion Jones.
And one of the male ones as well.
Ben Johnson?
I'm not going to say the names because I don't want to get sued. But we all know. But most famous, best in the world, and clear. I did the debate on ABC TV, if you remember, on drug use in sports. We had a big debate. Dawn Fraser was on the team with me, and blocking his name now. It'll come to me in a second.
So you said you couldn't mention the male person because you didn't want to skirt the laws of libel or slander. Yeah. But was that male person subsequently identified as having he's
suspicions of, but no proof.
I know who that is. I won't mention it either.
Can I go back? Can I take you back because you said you didn't know how this investigation was initiated or started? Did it come out of the fact that Essendon were being administered, or they put somebody in to examine Essendon's off-field thing from the AFL, put somebody in, either Sikowski or somebody along that line, to examine Essendon, and he saw something that was going on in the football department? Is that how it started?
Indirectly, I can say I think that's probably true, but I don't know.
Could I just add to what Don said?
Please.
Was it not because the compounding agent, Como Compounding, that's not you, is it? No. Didn't they send a bill to Dank for about $50,000 for these supplements?
Yes.
And Dank didn't pay them for some reason, and the compounding company Como went to Essendon and said, you owe us $50,000, and they said, what for? And that's how it started.
I believe that's
vaguely
correct.
right?
Yes, I mean that's the story I've heard, so I cannot confirm to you that's factual, but that's exactly what I heard. Even Stephen tells that story, so I'm assuming that's exactly what took place.
Where did you get involved? For my reading of the thing was that you were doing blood tests. Is that right? Were you doing anything along that line with the players?
No. So let's go back and look at how I got involved. Stephen had a program of monitoring, and I think what he was doing was absolutely brilliant. He wanted to monitor the football players' physiology using blood tests over the course of a 2-year period. Because at that point, and it's where I got to meet Dean Robinson, who I thought was absolutely, still is, a fabulous chap, had a program that was really rigorous. And Stephen thought that it was maybe too rigorous and that it would cause some harm to the players, and we might see that in the blood.
You mean in the training of
in the training, yes.
Okay.
Yep. Really
Physical
intensive
training.
Physical training, yeah. And he asked me, he said, what do you think about that? And I said, well, I think it's a great idea to do this. And then he said to me, well, I've posed it to Dr. Bruce Reid, who's the club doctor. Yeah, so here we go with another really wacko part of this story. And Bruce said he wasn't interested at all in what Stephen was proposing, but go ahead. Later on, when Bruce Reid was questioned on that...
That's what you understand he
yes,
said?
That was my understanding. Mm-hmm. Later on, Bruce Reid did say that he had no idea what Stephen Dank was doing.
Yes.
Well, and he wrote an email to the football board, the committee, didn't he?
Yes, that's what
saying he is not involved in what is happening at Essendon.
And you had a relationship with Dr. Reid because you wanted to assure him that what you thought was happening was kosher?
Indeed. I wrote a letter to Bruce Reid saying that Stephen Dank had contacted me, that he had asked me to look at the players' blood work, and would he mind if I made some suggestions? I never heard back from him.
So here's just a naive question. If you're being asked to assess the blood samples through pathology, which is your what you do, what were you being asked to do that for if they weren't to enhance the performance of the players with?
Yeah, good question. Well, there's two parts to that question. First is, why wasn't Bruce Reid being asked that? And the answer from Steve Dank was he wasn't interested. Yep. That was his answer. Mm-hmm. And Stephen said, I've got to have somebody give me some guidance on this, on, what you see as potential pitfalls if there's abnormal blood work. Mm. Now, I took this as like we do in medicine, as like a curbside consult. We're constantly asked by other professionals, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? And I said, I certainly had no issue. I said, I'm interested myself. I'm really curious as to what an intense, vigorous training program might do to the physiology of the players. Because there's one thing for certain, when they're overstressed, their hormone levels, like testosterone and growth hormone, will fall. And now that puts them at risk of not healing properly if they get injured. So they'll be put into a prolonged healing program rather than a short healing program. We both recognised that there's not a darn thing we could do about it by fixing the hormone issues, but we could at least say the training program needs to be altered so this is not happening.
So when you discovered there's some irregularities between some of the blood tests of the players, you were cited by, I think, the medical board that you didn't respond to that or didn't follow up on it.
Exactly.
That's what it says in
Correct.
Why didn't you?
Because
or wasn't it your purview to do that?
They weren't my patients. So here's where, in a summary of where this whole VCAT finding goes completely wrong.
Hang on, they weren't your patients yet you did the blood tests, or
I didn't.
you authorised the blood tests?
No, Stephen Dank got the blood test done.
But he'd have to get that under a doctor's authorisation, wouldn't he?
True.
That's you.
And that was me.
Yep.
Now, so I didn't actually come up with the idea of the blood test.
You're a freelance person.
He couldn't get Bruce Reid to sign off on it because Bruce Reid said, I'm not interested.
That's right.
And in order to do the program that they had approved, this scientific study for 2 years, he said, I need someone to sign the blood work. Well, I had no problem with that. Again, in a hospital setting, just to give you an example, day after day after day, other doctors who want blood work done, who go off call, will have another doctor come on and sign off on all the tests that they need to do for that particular patient. Happens all the time. So it's how you keep the continuity of care going. So I saw no irregularity whatsoever in signing these blood requests for Steve to use in his scientific program, which I believed at that time had been completely approved by the Essendon Football Club and Bruce Reid, but Bruce Reid wasn't interested in...
saw a couple of irregularities in some of the blood samples which you advised Dank about, did you? And he didn't follow up, or was that...
Well, we couldn't follow up. There was nothing to
do. What irregularities did you find?
Some low testosterone levels, very low levels of testosterone.
Our inflammatory markers all up, ESR, CRP, did that all elevate during season? But it's not a significant one, but I'd imagine they would be all elevated.
But Robin, you were cited by the medical board for not following up, and you say that wasn't your responsibility to do that. Are you saying that?
100%.
Yes.
When the medical board first looked at this, they concluded that with their expert, by the way, that they got to come in, said, Robin Wilcott isn't responsible for this at all. Bruce Reid is the person who's responsible. He's the club doctor. He's overseeing the program. He needs to know everything that's going on. And it disappeared. And I thought, I'm done. There's no problem here. Next thing I get is a note saying that the medical board, after having decided there was no issue, moved it up to VCAT. And now VCAT got involved. Now, once that happened, that's a very irregular thing to have happened. The thing is written off, but then gets kicked up. So there was pressure to keep this going. And I think APRA buckled under that pressure and said, we're washing our hands of this, it goes to VCAT.
So how deranged were the markers? Like for that to be held up, you know, it'd have to be pretty deranged markers for them to hold that you should have responded to it. You know, I'd imagine it wouldn't be like finding someone's liver enzymes through the roof and wondering whether they've got hepatitis. I'd imagine that their testosterone growth would just be down a little bit, not to a vital level.
Right. So
that's
you know, and we found a few other, like you're mentioning, some liver enzymes were off and so on, but that can be an incidental finding, doesn't mean anything. But I made little notes on the margins of the blood work, and that went back and got held at Essendon. So as part of the record, that I had signed off on little notes like, wow, this guy's testosterone is really low, exclamation mark, and that was that. Now, yeah, so go ahead.
Oh, no, so APRA and the medical board, APRA, the Australian Practitioners Regulation Agency.
Yes.
You said that at VCAT you had 7 charges cited at you.
Yes.
And you said that they lied about these are your words. You
They're
said
my
they
words.
lied. VCAT lied about what your involvement with those 7 charges were. Is that what you said? And
Absolutely.
What is that? Yes. And what did they lie about?
All right, so let's go into the first part of it. They claimed that I was the doctor responsible for overseeing them and that they were my patients.
Yep.
That's just not true. I never saw any of them physically. I mean, person to person, never saw them.
Where'd you get their blood from?
Steve Dank brought it over to my office.
I see.
Yeah, that was easy. So once they've made the statement that I was responsible for them, then everything else that followed, of course, looks terrible.
Oh,
I should have seen them. I should have counselled them.
effect.
I should have treated them. Not that you could treat them, because that's another joke. What would you treat them with?
What are you going to treat them with? That's what I was thinking. You can't give them testosterone or growth hormone.
And so all that was rubbish. That's complete nonsense. But here's where I've got my big beef, and I only discovered this recently because I never saw what their findings actually were. I got it from my attorney, who said, by the way, and I've got it on my phone here, this is going to be just a slap on the wrist. It's going to be a nothing. You don't have to worry about this at all. Well, it's not what happened. The VCAT finding was I was guilty of professional misconduct.
Yep.
Originally...
Did they deregister you as a result of that?
No, I'll come to that. Mm-hmm. Yeah, because this becomes, again, part of the hypocrisy in this whole story. Originally, APRA made it unprofessional conduct. Unprofessional conduct is a very different thing. If you say a swear word in front of a patient, you can be charged with unprofessional conduct. God. And it doesn't necessarily mean anything. But professional misconduct is something altogether different, very serious. That's number one. Number two, they also put in the findings that I refused to attend the hearing.
Yes.
I flew from the United States.
Why?
Sorry?
Why did you?
Because I wanted to defend myself.
But the word is that you went to the United States knowing that this court case was on, and you decided to stay on it knowing what was going to happen here.
Absolutely not. Complete rubbish. You have to remember, I spent most of my working career in the United States. I closed the Como office that I had.
And you were contracted to do over there, were you?
Yeah, yeah. I closed it down. I couldn't take it anymore. I'd had it. I was mentally wrung out by this whole thing, knowing that it was so unfair and so unreasonable, and I couldn't get my voice heard. I flew back from the United States to attend the VCAT hearing. My lawyer and the QC who was working with him told me to sit in a little ante-room and they would go in and negotiate with VCAT. And I said, I want to talk to them. I want to present my case. And they said, no, you'll be your own worst enemy if you get in front of VCAT. We're going to do it all for you, and there's nothing to worry about. It's going to be just a slap on the wrist and maybe a little fine. Well, it's not what happened. I did not know that when I went back to the United States to work again, because I'd taken time off to come here to do this hearing, didn't get my opportunity. They told me it'd be nothing, and then what happened. These were the findings. I was stunned when I read this. I couldn't believe what had happened.
The findings were $7,000 fine.
Correct.
And you were deregistered. Is that right?
No deregistering. And this is the part that makes no sense, because if you read in the findings that they consider I was a very, I can't remember what the word was, but I was a really bad doctor, dangerous. If I were that bad and dangerous, why didn't they restrict my license? There was no restriction whatsoever. It was pay the $7,000 fine. That I refused to do. So here's where, you could say, well, you didn't do the right thing. Well, I think I did, because I don't think I was represented terribly well. The findings were absolutely incorrect. I was furious, depressed at the beginning about it, and then I got really angry about it. I said, I'm not paying that $7,000. They're not going to get it out of me. What are they going to do? Come to the US and get the $7,000? No. So at the end, we were left with this kind of impasse that they slapped me around really hard, put the $7,000 fine, didn't restrict my license. Why didn't they? If I was that bad, they should have. Surely. That's not what happened.
You might have already answered this, but you said, your words, you were conned by Dank to join his program or his
Yes.
his outfit, if you like. How did he con you?
Well, so he told me right off the bat, I've talked to Bruce Reid about you. He's really happy that you're going to be on the program, because he wasn't interested in doing any of this stuff. And he said, and I'll get you a contract with the Essendon Football Club to officially, oversee what we're doing in this study. I thought it was going to be a great study. Get published, we could show what extreme
Benefit, all that
and all
stuff
that
is.
sort of thing. I thought it'd be a very useful study, but none of that happened. None of it happened. So after a while, I was going, Steve, where's my contract? Well, it didn't take place.
So he was a bit edgy and a bit prevaricated a bit about what he got you on board for.
Yes.
He may have conned you into doing things that you wouldn't have agreed to had you known what the program was.
Well, given yes,
What you
hindsight
know
here
now.
is really fantastic now.
So, in your opinion, is this the greatest? In your opinion, I don't want to put words in your mouth, is what the AFL and what happened to Essendon probably one of the greatest misjustices of modern Australian sport, or Australian sport probably ever, or did they get their just desserts?
No, they were treated terribly. And I saw, some of them felt suicidal. You've seen all the stories.
Yep.
Look what happened to the coach. I mean, seriously, this was a miscarriage of justice of the worst kind. And you still have to wonder why it got so extreme and so out of hand when it was based on just falsity.
It's the voracious press trying to make headline after headline. I said this when I was on the footy show. I said, they just keep going and going. They have no facts. They have no idea what they're talking about. They might speculate, but that's a hell of a lot different when you're putting people's lives in jeopardy, like the coach, James Hird, who became suicidal, and a number of other people.
Yes, absolutely. It's beyond disgusting. And, the press and our authorities, like APRA and VCAT, owe us all a massive apology for being so wrong and causing so much harm. I mean, I felt terrible for the football players. One was worried about what would this do to his genetics and his ability to have a normal family and all that sort of stuff. That's disgusting.
So this is do you think, in hindsight, do you think Essendon were administered do you think they were administered illegal substances in hindsight, looking back on it, or would you still say you couldn't quantify that?
I'd have to say I've got no idea. I've got no sense that they were. None.
The only way they would have found out is if that Stephen Dank had supplied a couple of vials or liquids that were being injected into the players. Why was he ever asked for those, or did he destroy them all, or did he not hand them over, or wouldn't that be an easy way to find out if they analysed what was being injected?
Yeah, I think he was definitely asked about it, but the vials would have been thrown away because you don't keep them once they're empty. So I've just got to go with what I know, and Steve was adamant he didn't give them anything illegal.
Did you get the chemicals made up, the peptides compounded, and
Not me.
No.
They were being compounded.
Yep.
Before I even came
Yep.
to Melbourne to do my stuff, they were already being made. Peptides were common here, or still are, commonly used in Australia. And I just didn't know anything about them. I had to learn very quickly what they were, and I became very interested and eventually gave lectures on them here and overseas.
Yeah. So
Because
if they were giving the injection, wouldn't each player have to have been written a script for the compounded molecule, or did he go do a bit differently and just put it all under his name or something? And
yes, they should have all had scripts,
Yeah.
and there weren't any.
yeah, okay.
Don, it's one of the
It's fascinating.
it's one of the all-time.
Why
Why
have you come back to Australia?
Because it's home and it's where my son lives, and in Australia, and so I come back here on a regular basis. I'm planning on returning permanently in a couple of years. The United States is
I
in
thought you
terrible
might have
trouble.
been coming back here to try and clear your name or put the thing.
Well, this is a good chance right here, we hope.
It's a bit of a start because I'm not done with it. At some point, I want VCAT and APRA to admit they lied, and that I was unjustly accused of being the doctor in charge of a program of administering illegal drugs to the Essendon football players. I had nothing to do with it, but I haven't been able to get a voice. So, this is really what I find fascinating. All those journalists who came to me and wanted stories, when I got back to them and said, I want to tell what really happened, they go, oh, it's an old story now, we're not interested.
Yeah, well, that's the way the media works.
Yeah.
The other thing is VCAT. Were you unaware or naive that it's not set up for lawyers, it's set up for you as an individual to represent yourself?
I didn't know that at the time.
Do you know that now?
Yes, I absolutely do. So,
Good question, Don.
It's a great question. As a result of knowing that, I just took APRA in front of the South Australian Tribunal on another issue, which was my social media postings on COVID. And I wrote to APRA and said, I'm sick of you. I'm absolutely sick of you lying and misrepresenting me and whacking me all the time because you were so good at doing it the whole 8 or 9 years that I worked in Melbourne, constantly after me, and never could find anything wrong until Essendon. And they hit me with it. Some person in Australia complained about one of my postings on Facebook, and APRA came back and said, we're going to restrict they were going to restrict my practice until I had done an ethics course and become re-educated on COVID. I pointed out to them, I'm an expert on COVID. I led the COVID task force in my county in America. And I said, you can't tell me that I'm not an expert on COVID. So I took them to SACAT in South Australia last year and I won. Yes, I'm very aware of my rights now. And I'd be happy to take them in front of SACAT anytime they want to misrepresent me. I'm not taking it anymore.
Now, finally, Robin Wilcourt, please don't shout at me for asking you this question, but on the Google machine here, it says, the last sentence says, in 1998,
Yes.
Dr. Wilcourt was convicted in the US of lurid and dissolute conduct after he exposing himself to a police officer in Nevada.
Yes.
Is that what's that about?
Yeah, no, that's another very interesting story. So I've had some extraordinarily interesting entanglements with authorities. This happened right after I had some nose surgery done, and I had come home I was on my way home from work. I excused myself from work during the day. It was about midday-ish on this day. I think it was a Friday. Because I had just had the packs taken out of my nose and I'd taken some opioids and I wasn't feeling well. So my colleague said, yeah, go.
Opioids for pain.
Yes. Yeah, yes, I'm not a drug addict. So I took these things, and on the way home, I needed to go to the bathroom, and it was on a course where I normally used to run.
You needed to urinate.
So I knew, yeah, exactly. So I knew where the place was, so I pulled up, went in, and this guy came up next to me. In hindsight, he probably didn't look like the way I thought he did, because as I was driving home, you got these orange cones on the road. I was trying to avoid them because it seemed to me like they were about 5 or 6 feet tall. It was only afterwards I looked back and said, no, that wasn't true. They weren't. They didn't have different cones on the road, but it looked weird. So anyway, I went in there and...
So you were under the effect of the opioids?
Yeah,
You went in where?
into the bathroom.
Yes, so you went
To
into
take
the
a leak.
actual toilet.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right. So this big guy dressed in a big leather jacket, burly looking fella, looked like a typical biker except he didn't have a beard, came up to me and stood next to me and he said, "Show me your..."
Willie.
And I was thinking about it. I looked at him and thought, well, there's no harm in doing that because I don't want to antagonise the bugger. So I did. I just turned and faced him and he didn't do anything. I finished taking a leak. I walked out of the toilet and he grabbed me and said, "I'm holding you here for
Exposing yourself.
They
That's
got
extraordinary.
They got 23 people that day doing the same thing.
But I wouldn't have showed, if it was me, I wouldn't have showed him. Why did you show him?
Well, maybe
Well,
you're
I'm
intimidated
I'm
because you're...
standing there taking a leak and I'm looking at him thinking, well, I don't know what he's going to do to me. But one thing I didn't want to have happen was someone whack me on the nose. That was my thinking
I
at the
think
time.
I'd take the whack on the nose and cop this fella.
No,
Maybe
I
if
just
you're not
had...
under the influence of opioids, you mightn't do that, Don.
And you hadn't had your nose just operated on either.
Anyhow, we only asked the questions, Don. If that seems
And
to
this,
be...
again, this didn't amount to anything. I went to
Yep.
the court case, had to pay $250, no restriction from the medical board, nothing happened. And so that was that.
What were you pulled up for in the first place? Driving erratically, were you?
No. There was no. It was that. It was just the going to the bathroom to take a leak.
And was he a policeman, the guy that came in?
He was a policeman. Yeah.
He was a policeman and asked you to show you your old fella and then charged you for it.
Yeah.
And he wasn't
as I
in
said,
uniform, didn't have a badge, nothing?
No, he was dressed like a biker. They, as I said, they did it to 23 other people.
Gee whiz.
And they had a field day.
Well, now look, Don and everyone, I've always been interested in speaking to you, and we're so grateful you came in. People can take from this what they will. You seem to be pretty certain about everything you've said. As I say, we only ask the questions and you give the answers. So, Robin Wilcourt, we really... Yes, Don?
I think it's fascinating because Bruce Reid has passed away, but he did a tape before he passed away.
Uh-huh.
And his version of what happened in the Essendon Saga
Is on the tape.
is on the tape.
And his son has it.
And I think his son has it. He recorded it with his son, with his version of what happened.
Maybe as a result of this, Don. And maybe if this gets any oxygen, maybe he might release the tape and see if whatever's on the tape, it verifies and corroborates what you say,
Sure.
or he might dispute what it, but that would be the next chapter in this ongoing saga.
What's the name of the molecule that makes you tanned and get a big erection? I might open up a clinic.
Melanotan
All
2.
right.
And I remember,
Okay. You can vouch-
I was
yeah,
a defender of James Hird on the Footy Show because he went brown, and I don't know if he got an erection or not, but I said, I remember at my exact words, I said, I don't know what you're having to go at James Hird for. He is not a player, and he can take cockroach semen if he wants to. It's got nothing. He can take any drug he likes. I do remember saying that.
Yeah.
And in fact, his mother, he contacted me and said, "Thank you for backing me up." I said, "It's got nothing to do with him. He wasn't a player. He can take
Yeah,
whatever
sure.
he likes."
Absolutely.
So anyhow, Robin Wilcourt, Dr. Robin Wilcourt, thank you very much for joining us on You Cannot Be Serious. I reckon Essendon fans and football people in general will be fascinated by our chat. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure being here.